every factor is within your control. There is no praying to the Google gods. I really hope this works. I hope these backlinks I sprinkled on the website pays off. Like, you don't have that. It's within your control. You can control quality. You can control your website. You can control the user experience. And that's a very powerful place to approach SEO, because it doesn't mean it's up to chance. You own the outcome. If you don't get the desired outcome, it's not because of some voodoo magic. It's because of you didn't do the work.
So why don't we kick it off? We got to go back to your story as a founder, because you have, in your own words, you stumbled your way into SEO, coming from more of a sales background, but you've got experience in tech and startups and having raised funds in the past. And so some of these things led you down this path of, hey, SEO isn't as challenging as it sometimes seems to be. It's something that if you learn and you start to execute against it, like what actually works, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, there's a model and anyone can do it. And so demystifying some of these things around backlinks or around keywords and around things that get thrown out in the SEO world where people might start to lean one way, too much one way over another. Would love to dig into your background and hear just how you came into where you are right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think back in the day, it was all about hacks and things like that. But I think by the end of this episode, your audience is going to have a really solid framework for kind of answering any SEO question that comes up within their organization. So I've been an entrepreneur for my entire career. I dropped out of college, and I started two failed startups where I spent about 6 years failing. The first one, 0 users, 0 revenue. The second one, I cold called my way to 6K MER, but we still failed for various reasons. And I ended up joining a startup as employee number 8 and like won the lotto, because we grew to 200 employees in 4 years, bootstrapped, by making a ton of cash. And in the process of doing this, I got experience across literally every department, from sales, biz dev, support, product development, legal, finance. And I think outside of the founders, I had one of the most cross-functional roles in the organization as a 26-year-old in an industry I didn't know existed when I joined the company. After 4 years, I burned out, and I wanted to get back into startups. But when I looked at my skill set, it's an enterprise biz dev skill set, and now I'm a 30-year-old and just felt very inaccessible. How do I build an enterprise product? How do I build an enterprise support team, an enterprise legal team? And I realized I didn't have the right skills to service me as an entrepreneur. So I joined an SEO agency, my friend's SEO agency, for minimum wage in Seattle. That puts me well below the poverty line, because I knew that in order to sell SEO, I was going to have to learn it. It's consultative, so you can't sell it unless you actually know how it works. And I ended up growing our blog from 0 to 100,000 organics a month. Is this sales guy? And then it's all kind of spiraled from there.
Nice. Very cool. And so when you're doing this, it sounds like there are lots of case studies as you started to dig into SEO. You've got a great one around do not pay, and the way that they used landing pages based on search, some of the geographic considerations where it's like, I mean, maybe that's something interesting to dig into. Is SEO isn't a playbook. Like there isn't one, hey, here's your business, go. It's more of a book of plays. Like what works for do not pay might not work for, let's say, levels, because we don't have the same geographic constraints. Maybe we do with some things, but not others. So would love to dig into more around how you started to learn some of these things of leaning into SEO where it works and what you did.
Yeah, so when I ended up growing the SEO agency's blog that I worked at to 100,000 organics, and I ended up outranking Instagram for Instagram support, and I ended up ranking right below Shopify for Shopify support, and I ended up outranking Shopify for is Shopify safe. And what I realized is that it's not about technical hacks, it's not about backlinks, because I didn't know any of those. I didn't build any backlinks. What I saw is that the content that I created was better than Instagram support page. And the content I created was better than Shopify's page on whether it's safe or not. And so really I learned two things, that it's all about creating higher quality content. And then the second is being more relevant to the search that the person's making.
Yeah, the way that we've been thinking about long tail content, and it's exactly that. It's focus on, like Haney's thing is, what am I adding to the internet today? Like if the quality is not there, it's like, why even distribute it?
Yeah, that's where I'd love to learn more is when you talk about that quality lens, how you arrived at that. Was that sort of accidental? Did you just sort of follow your instinct and end up making better content? Was it that their content was particularly terrible? So just meeting a sort of minimum bar got you over that? And then once you sort of got that insight, however that occurred, how did you go about sort of operationalizing this idea of higher quality content around whatever the topic were you were doing?
That's exactly it. I didn't set out to grow it to 100K visitors a month, and I didn't come in with the concepts that I ended up ultimately learning. But when I ended up ranking above these brands, I looked at the content and I realized my content is better. Instagram support page is garbage. It doesn't help the user. And then I looked at my page and I had a bunch of information on, I had collected. And to be honest, my information probably didn't help the user either because you can't get a hold of Instagram support. It's impossible. But users would definitely stay longer on my page than they would Instagram's. And then I looked at the things in terms of relevance, like the URL and the H2s I was optimized where Instagram didn't really take that into consideration. You know, at this point, I've published more than 8,000 pages of content with my team. And basically our entire approach is, it's 2022. If I told you that Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok use user engagement metrics to influence reach, you'd say, duh, Nick, everybody knows that. But for some reason, Google, the world's most innovative big data company that owns the entire analytics stack from the device Android to Chrome, the browser, to Google Analytics, people don't make that connection that Google has the data on how users behave on one page that they show versus another page that they could show. And if you think about it, there really isn't a better heuristic that Google could use than how users spend, two pages. You can't read the language. They're both in alien. You're Google, you can't understand it, but you can see that one user spent, the user spent 5 minutes on this page and 30 seconds on this page. Just by that, you can kind of guess that the 5-minute page is better. It creates more value for the user. They go deeper into the website. They return more often. They type in branded searches more often. And that's influenced my entire strategy. I don't know how to build backlinks. I've never built a backlink because I've never had to learn how to get the outcomes that I want to deliver.
How do you learn, as you started operationalizing this approach more, and it sounds like really indexing on engagement time, how do you optimize that? How do you learn what it is that will make people stick around and then repeat that over and over again across different companies and different topics?
Yeah, we've figured out a repeatable process, and it's different for every niche. So, for example, users are expected to behave differently when you search for a recipe versus when you search for glucose monitoring. And a good time on site for a recipe search will be vastly different than a glucose monitoring website. And so the whole strategy involves Googling the keywords you want to rank for, and then looking at what's already ranking, and then making your content more comprehensive. So if you look at the first 10 results, even the first positions 1 through 3, they're not going to have content that's in positions 4 through 10. And really what you want to do is you just want to figure out what they didn't cover based off of other websites that tell you what they covered, and then you just combine it into this Uber guide that provides more value than any other page Google could show.
That's interesting. So you find this is one of the, there's so many little things that one is told to do if you want to make SEO optimized content, right? I remember when I started, one of the things that some wisdom, some SEO person had passed on is like, no article should be longer than 1,200 words because that's the optimum length. And I don't think we've written an article shorter than 1,200 words because we just do very deep stuff. And as a journalist, that's not the way I think. I'm like, what is the story I need to tell? But it sounds like you've like that kind of a length constraint isn't something that you worried about. Comprehensiveness is more important.
Yeah, and actually, if you think about it, one of the easiest ways to be more comprehensive is to write more words. And so if you're a new startup and you're competing from a place of weakness, write more words, and that will make up for the lack of other factors that you don't have. And then once I hit full authority mode, I can get away with publishing less words. because of the prior history I've developed with Google and servicing their users well.
Have you found an upper limit to that? Have you found that there's a point at which a post gets too long and users lose interest, or that other people come along with more specific posts and are able to sort of grab the traffic because they're more specific on something?
Yeah, I think specificness is huge. But in terms of length, generally we stop at it sounds dumb, but just like operationally, I'm publishing 8,000 pages a year. Like I have to stop somewhere. I can't just make one page 10,000 words just from a service delivery perspective. And so I generally shoot from 800 words if I'm like really authoritative and already crushing the niche, to 2,500 words if I'm new to the niche and I want to beat stronger competitors. It's just logistics.
I've not heard the strategy before of sort of combining what falls in the first rankings with what falls in the second amount of the articles that are in the later sort of rankings of it. How do you how much do you index on um, we're sort of honing in on what people are actually searching for, right? This is always the challenge of like people search for continuous glucose monitor, but that's a very broad term. Are they searching for continuous glucose monitor for diabetes, or continuous glucose monitor cost, or continuous glucose, so how do you kind of hone in on what the right things to cover, even when you're being comprehensive, are?
So one of the big mistakes that a lot of brands make is they think there's one keyword or a handful of keywords or like 100 keywords that are important to their brand. I did some research before I jumped on the call. There's 70,000 keywords representing 1.5 million searches a month related to glucose plus tracking, monitoring, levels. And that's not even, and those 70,000 keywords, you might need to write 1,000 pages to rank for all of the ways that people are searching around this thing that you guys do.
Right. So again, it comes back to sort of comprehensiveness as opposed to, right, trying to own some of the top keywords, some of the ones that we think might be directly in our sort of bullseye of, metabolic health is like one we've tried to own because we're like, well, that's the space where we're playing in, right? That's the thing we want to do, is like own metabolic health. But, that's one of the debates we've had, is like, how much effort do you put into owning that keyword? And it sounds like you would scale more on, create a whole bunch of articles to get all of the kind of, again, I don't know if long tail is the right word there, but cover more of the keywords than just index on one.
Yeah, and so when I say comprehensive, I mean on that individual page that you're trying to rank for a specific keyword, but I also mean covering the entire topic. So John Mueller, the head of Google Search, at least public facing, he has said it's hard to call a 30-page website authoritative. And when you think about it, in 2022, literally anyone can create a 30-page website. And so if Google gave that glucose monitoring keyword to anyone who wrote 30 pages about glucose monitoring, it'd do two things. The first is there'd be so much fluctuation that the next day someone else would beat you because you beat the guys before you. And the second is there'd be a bunch of scammers publishing glucose monitoring content that really don't deserve to be there. They don't have the business model to support that keyword. They don't have the knowledge that you guys have. And so Google has this kind of barrier to entry. 2022, it's so easy to publish content. There's AI everywhere, where the more content you publish about a topic, the easier all of that content will rank all together. And the example that I always use is if you look at a 30-page website and a 1,000-page website about glucose monitoring and metabolic health, all things being equal, the guys who wrote 1,000 pages probably know more. One, they learned a ton while writing it, but two, they also have some sort of business model behind it to support that level of investment, because creating 1,000 pages by experts on glucose monitoring is not cheap. It's actually very expensive. And so it kind of acts as a filter for all of the bad actors on the internet that would love to rank for that keyword, but not do a good job at servicing Google's users.
Interesting. I wonder, I'd love to dig in more to this notion of quality, because this is a lot of where we live, and a lot of our tension sometimes with SEO is, we approach our editorial operation much more as a sort of traditional editorial site as opposed to a marketing tactic, right? We're not writing to get conversions. We're writing to educate the world about metabolic health. The flip side of that is we need people to see this. Otherwise, nobody learns, right? Like I can write all the great articles in the world, but if they don't reach the people who need them, then who cares how good they are and how well resourced and reported they are? So we index very highly on quality. And I could see a counter argument to what you're saying, right? If the important thing is to generate 1,000 pages, there's a little bit of a tension there between, it's easy to generate 1,000 kind of low quality pages, right? And just like cover a topic. It's really hard to generate 1,000 pages of like deeply reported research stuff. So how do you benchmark on that quality thing? How do you know when you've hit the right quality bar?
I don't bend on either. So it has to be more valuable than any other page Google could show, and I need to do it at scale bigger than anyone else I'm competing with. And if I do those two things, I'll always win, regardless of backlinks, regardless of authority, regardless of DR, regardless of all these things that SEO say are important. If I do higher quality content at a bigger scale, I've never not won.
So digging into the idea of long tail content, I love that example of do not pay. And it sounds like it's along the lines of what you're saying, where if you create a page that is like how to pay a parking ticket, well, that's the macro category. And it's like, maybe you rank on that, but that's not helping to serve the people that are looking for these specific things. How to pay a parking ticket in Wichita, how to like, and that's sort of when, as like to Haney's point, when we start to think about metabolic health, it's like people are searching for such nuanced things where it's like, is, rapini good for my metabolic health? It's like the most long tail thing where it's some cruciferous vegetable, but it's not just broccoli. It's like, I mean, it's like it gets really long tail. And so we go, cool, we need a piece. We put up a message to our entire team that says, Haney, I think we need something on rapini and olive oil as it pertains to metabolic health, right? But we're doing this as far as like having the quality lens, but also serving what we think is going to be the most helpful for members. So we'd love to hear more about the way you think about like pairing quality
Relevance.
with relevance and long tail content, because they are juxtaposed in some ways where it's like it's hard to do both, so they come with trade-offs.
It's very hard. Content operations, publishing 8,000 pages in a year is everything but SEO. It's logistics, it's operations, and it's actually mostly people and processes. You can't hold people accountable to doing something a specific way 8,000 times 800 words unless it's documented. So we have over 1,000 SOPs. But going back to your example of parking tickets, you can't create a page about dispute a parking ticket and then rank in every city in the country, because when you have a parking ticket in Wichita, Kansas, there's a different kind of motion than when you have one in Seattle. There's a different courthouse, there's different rules, and you're higher quality when you're specific to the exact problem that the user has. When I was like, just preparing for the show, I found keywords like kettle glucose levels and fasting blood glucose levels and normal glucose levels, and you just can't answer those three questions with one page. You have to create separate subtopics to be very specific to the user, and that's what quality is. It's answering the exact question that they're looking for.
So is there ways that like how have you managed, so as you've been doing this, how do you manage it all where you start to have more and more content out in the world and some of it needs to be updated? Like you want things to remain relevant, you want things to remain updated. And so the more you grow, it's like the problem becomes exponentially harder to manage everything.
Well, I'm a consultant, and so I do the things that people pay me to do. And in this case, do not pay. We grew them from 0 to 1.5 million organics a month, and they wanted more surface area. So we focused on creating more surface area, and not going to the courthouse in Seattle shut down and it's at a new address. It just wasn't interesting as creating more surface area for them. You guys, there'll be new health updates, and people find out new things about the metabolic gateways, and I think it probably is more important for you guys, especially when it's related to health, that you actually do have to follow the latest news, and you have to go back and update that content because it's people's health on the line. And so I think in your case, it'd probably be a disservice if you guys didn't refresh that content every once in a while with the latest and greatest, scientific findings.
You get you get sites like Wiki, where super high domain authority, constantly being updated, limitless. It's almost like unlimited numbers of pages because they're always getting updated and created every day about the longest of long tail things. The challenge becomes when you're an organization like WebMD or Healthline or Mayo Clinic, like something that is reporting on reporting in an objective way, or as objective a way as possible, knowing that things are always evolving and changing. I think that becomes exponentially harder to solve for, is this problem that you're trying to make sure your content is up to date, it's guiding people in the right direction, knowing that it's not possible to just have that oversight on everything as you scale a team.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And
some of it relies a bit on the community in a way.
yeah, it does. And it, can get very expensive. So NerdWallet, just IPO'd, I think, for $1 billion. They have something like 14,000 pages. And it would take you, I think I calculated something like 400 or 600 pages a month for 4 years to catch up with them. Well, NerdWallet has 131 writers on staff. I calculated their payroll at over $500,000 a month just on content. And so, when you think about these health lines or these WebMDs, probably $1 million a month on writers and editors and scientists that are creating this content.
So I'm going to ask a very self-serving question then. How do we beat Healthline in our little specific part of the world, right? They write a little bit about metabolic health, but we want to make sure when people search metabolic health, we do have higher quality content. We know we do, in terms of quality as measured by sort of accuracy, reporting, depth, et cetera. Maybe not quality as measured by, are we answering people's questions? Because I don't quite know how to answer that. How do you go up against a NerdWallet if you had a smaller, targeted financial organization coming to you, or us against a Healthline?
So let's talk about you and Healthline. When I said earlier, there's 70,000 keywords I found related to glucose monitoring and levels and tracking. And then there's probably another 70,000 or 100,000 related to metabolic health. And there's another 100,000 related to some of the other more complicated words you said earlier in the thing that I didn't understand. And, when you look at the human body, that's like literally there's probably 100,000 keywords about like my fingers and like wrinkles and like aging and like organs. And so, WebMD, even though they spend maybe $1 million a month, they can't be everywhere. There's simply too much searches. There's too much variability in the things that humans need. And so the way you guys win is you just focus on metabolic health. You focus on glucose monitoring. You publish 1,000 pages on each, and you're going to crush them.
What other metrics, you mentioned time on page. What other metrics do you look at to know whether or not you're being successful?
So I think that time on page is a signal for quality. There's other signals for quality that I think exist, like overall site engagement, return visits. They hit your page and then they stop searching for that thing. One of the things that I found really effective that I think is kind of slept on is referral traffic. The more referral traffic I can send a page, the easier and higher it ranks, the better I beat competitors. And my theory here is that, Google discovers 100 zillion pages every single day, and 99.99999% will never receive a human visitor. Most content published will never be read by a human. And so if you can jam social traffic or email or Reddit or literally any referral traffic to a particular page, it immediately puts you on the map of Google because you were somehow able to get all of these people to come to this content and engage with it. And then Google goes, hey, I think I should test these guys in my search results. And they'll bump you up. And if your user engagement metrics are comparable to what they're already showing, then you'll stick there. If they're not, you'll bounce back off and you'll stay off the first page until you rewrite the content, and Google will give you another shot.
What's the distinction there between a referral link and a backlink, or a referral and a backlink?
So a backlink is just a website linking to, like, in your Instagram profile, your LinkedIn profile, or a guest post or whatever. Most of those links will never receive a single referral visitor. Referral traffic is when there's a link and then people click through and they go to your website. And it works. I found it works with email. It works with YouTube. It works with Reddit, TikTok, Pinterest. Any kind of traffic that you can send to a particular page is helpful as long as that traffic is engaged.
And you mentioned there, people landing on the page and sticking around. So is bounce rate something that you index highly on?
Yeah. So, bounce rate, time on site, number of pages visited are the things that Google Analytics tracks. Now, I don't actually know my competitors' data, but what I've seen is that when I deploy a super aggressive pop-up that like jumps out at the user 1 second after they land on the page, bounce rate goes up, number of pages viewed goes down, and my rankings go down almost immediately. If you have a lot of traffic, go deploy an aggressive pop-up and you'll lose that traffic pretty quick. Because the UX metrics decrease, there could be no other reason that you would lose that ranking so quickly. Anything that's harmful to the user, slow spike speed, you increase your pricing to $1 billion, anything that's going to decrease those metrics will like almost sometimes overnight drop your rankings.
The slow site speed gets at what I wanted to ask about next, because I know this is one of the other things you've talked about is the idea of sort of technical SEO, and like that's a thing that comes up, right? Tweaks to your page and your site. So how do you think about the role of some of these other things, and if they are over-indexed, if people think too much of them, why do you think that is?
So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll see my tagline is 0 to 1.5 million organics a month without backlinks or technical BS. When I started SEO, I actually tried several times throughout the last 15 years, and none of it stuck because I focused on the technical things. And I'm not a very technical person. My mind doesn't work that way. I'm better at coming onto podcasts than I am, doing WordPress plugins. And I didn't see success until I focused on content quality and content scale. I don't think you need to be technical to win at SEO. I didn't log into Google Search Console until I took 3 projects to 100,000 visits, and I still don't understand a lot of the things SEOs talk about. And I think the reason that it's so prevalent is because SEO, like traditionally, now it's getting more mainstream and like there's like normal people doing it. But I think traditionally SEO attracted a really kind of weird crowd who is more interested in managing those technical aspects than they are managing content and servicing the user. And so I think just the pure nature of how many weird tech guys came in, that's all they talk about.
I guess it also seems easier, right? It's like if I can just hire some smart programmer who knows what they're doing and they go do something on the back end of my website and then I get an increase, that is cheaper and way easier than me producing 1,000 pages of content.
I have a 45-person content team and people are so difficult to manage, and absolutely is it easier to manage a WordPress plugin than it is people. So like I totally get the allure. Like people are really, really hard. You got to motivate and inspire and coach and mentor and sometimes discipline. And it's really tough, especially for I think the crowd that was traditionally attracted to SEO, the make money online crowd. I think they, what I see is like I see a lot, not anymore, but like, and it's changing, but like I see, I just see a lot of SEOs never had a normal career, before they got into SEO. They went straight from like, I don't want to wake up and go to work to like, how do I make money online to like black hat world to like backlinks and redirects.
Let's go into this idea of a couple things. One is, what do you think most people get wrong about SEO? Like we've touched on a few of them. If you were to say like, what are the top 3 things that people get wrong time and time again so that they don't go down this path of spending time unnecessarily in one place where it's like maybe lukewarm results?
Yeah, so I think there's like the biggest one is people think they can hack it, and that ultimately it looks like a lot of things. It looks like AI content, it looks like backlinks, it looks like weird technical things, and really people are looking for a shortcut. And if you want to win and you want to win big, there's no shortcut. You have to put in the work, you have to build a team, you have to publish the content, you have to service the user, you have to create value for Google searchers. And if you can do all those things, which is like the long cut, it's the hard way, you'll be rewarded very greatly.
Interesting. Let's go into this other idea. It's always this philosophical, we'll call it capital M marketing conversation to have, but there are certain, with marketing, it's important to have a book of plays as opposed to a playbook, right? Depending on category, depending on industry, depending on like, let's just keep going forever with this example. But sometimes we as a society, we can fall into this trap of giving prescriptive advice. Like everyone should be on digital, like on social. It's like, well, maybe not. Like maybe depending on the category you're of business you're in, the industry you're in, it's like that's not a good use of your time, especially as a small startup. And so when you think about SEO, like I'd imagine are certain businesses where SEO and content creation is extremely important. Let's give ourselves a pat on the back and be self-serving and say Levels needs content, right? Why not have some rationalization here? But there are other things, like assume that someone has a small independent business that serves, it's like a B2B business in a smaller town, and they might not benefit from spending all this time creating content because of geographic constraints and right? When you start to think about this, like, where do you see SEO being great, or where is it a really good play? And where might it not be the best play? And the analog is like, if you're in the direct to consumer business and you're creating a product like that, it's extremely important to be on digital. It's extremely important to make sure that you're creating content and social, and that's how you're going to appeal to people. But if you're in the enterprise game, like, digital is maybe not the best recommendation. So let's like bring it back to SEO. When you think about it, like, where should people play, and where should they maybe think twice about it before spending all this time?
It's a great point. I run a content agency, and I'm saying everyone should publish more content. So in that sense, it is self-serving. I'll give you two-part answer. The first is two industries where you can ignore everything we've talked about up until this point. The first is converters. So like, how do I convert JPEGs to PNGs, or how do I convert MP4s to AVIs or whatever? You don't actually need to create any content. You need to have a great converter. And when you look at the people that are ranking for MP4 to AVI or YouTube to MP3, they don't have any content on their website. It's usually a one-page app. But going back to the user engagement metrics, they have a better product than the other pages that Google could show, and that reflects in the user engagement metrics. Another example would be a calculator. You don't need a lot of content to rank for a calculator if it services the user in the way that they want to calculate. You can throw it up and it'll, I would say also local businesses, but I don't actually know about local SEO just because I've never found it particularly interesting. I've never taken on any projects in the space. I want to work with, I want to work with the most ambitious brands on the internet, and local businesses aren't that. So I don't think it's probably not less important as well in a local business.
So when Haney and I go and start a widget company in his hometown in Minnesota, Edina, Minnesota, right?
Austin, Minnesota.
Yes. Close. Austin. When we go and start a widget co, Haney and Ben's Widget Co. in Austin, Minnesota, we probably don't want to be investing time in SEO, is what
that seems like the worst thing you and I could go do, given our expertise. The content guy and the growth guy probably shouldn't do that, given what Nick just said.
Hey, if the intrinsic motivation's there's no stopping anyone, Haney.
I mean, it depends on your audience, right? If you can sell widgets from Wisconsin to anyone in the world, then yeah, content's probably a great play. But if your geographic service area is 10 miles, then you probably don't need as much content as what we're discussing on this podcast.
Coming off that marketing point, where do you think about content? And maybe this varies by industry, but where do you think about content in the funnel? Do you think of it as a top of funnel awareness that's job is to get people to the site and then other things take over? Or do you ever do projects where you're really indexing on conversions from the content?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's totally both. And what I found is that you will rank for those bottom of the funnel keywords that have high commercial value a lot easier if you have middle and top of the funnel content supporting to it and linking to it, especially if you can get people to search for a top of the funnel phrase and then click through to your bottom of the funnel. It's like a really great indicator to Google that you have something special going on, and they'll give you a shot at page one. Typically what we do is we'll try and saturate bottom of the funnel, and then we'll go to mid funnel, and then we'll go to top of funnel. What I don't do is just stop at bottom of the funnel. I found it to be a lot less effective than if you have that supporting content, going back to just kind of that authority of having a lot of content about a particular subject. Bottom of the funnel isn't generally enough.
I'm curious, coming off the example, it sounds like this might have been a path you went down at Do Not Pay in terms of the localization of what could be done there. One of the thought exercises we played with recently was what would it look like to 10x content at Levels? And in thinking through that, what I came with is, without 10xing the resources, or even more 15xing the resources that we have in terms of people and expense, one of the ways we would increase content would be to create very repeatable formats. So the way that Thumbtack does Plumber San Diego, Plumber LA, Plumber whatever, right? So
Yep.
we could
Yep.
do something like, glucose level by a food, glucose apple, glucose strawberry, glucose
Yes.
whatever, very dynamically created, probably types of pages where you bang out 1,000 of those. Where does that kind of a strategy fit in your notion of being comprehensive and having a volume of content to help your rankings?
You're absolutely right. There's all these aggregator and websites that have these landing pages that are like barbershops in Seattle and Greek restaurants in Greenwood and things of that nature. I don't think that particular example is programmatic. I think you will have to write a little bit of content, but I think it's probably a lot easier to publish that amount when you only do a particular type of template. You don't have to have an SEO look at every page. You have the SEO look at the template for the page 1,000 times, and then the writers end up doing whatever the SEO says. So I use this strategy pretty successfully on my second project. I created a website called doggypedia.org, and I published 200 pages, and it was basically breed 1 plus breed 2 mix. So Husky Corgi, German Shepherd, Golden Retriever. And literally the template was the same across every one of those pages. The content was specific to the breed, but it was a lot easier to manage from just the operational perspective, having one template. And I ended up growing to 100,000 organics a month as well, with a DR9, which is one of the things that informed my opinion that authority in DR isn't as important as the quality. So yeah, I love it. You should totally do that for every food group.
I'm just curious, what was on those pages? What was the content on the breed mix pages?
So it's basically, going back to being the most comprehensive thing. I'll share some hacks at the. It's kind of clever. I'll share that at the end. But it's basically like, all right, well, like, what is it like owning this mixed breed? What health problems do they have? What's their energy levels? What kind of diet do they need? How much do they weigh? How big do they get? How dangerous are they? Or friendly are they? Like, are they good with kids? Is it good for an apartment? Just think about everything a dog owner would want to know about a dog before they buy the dog breed. And then it was all just the same thing for 200 pages, but swapped out keywords. So the hack is kind of clever. Going back to user engagement metrics, one of the user engagement metrics that I believe Google uses is, let's say I'm in position 4. If people scroll past position 1, 2, 3 and click me, then I think that'll ultimately bring my position up. And so what I noticed with this dog breed space is that everyone's like, oh, the Husky Corgi is so cute and fluffy, and like, you should get one, and it's like amazing. But I went the opposite direction. I went contrarian because I wanted to get clicked even if I was in position 6. And so my meta titles, which shows up in the search, was, here's 3 reasons not to get this mixed breed. And everyone else is saying you should get it, and I'm saying don't get it. And of course they scroll down and they click me because I'm the only one who's saying something that no one else is.
And that's probably why they're searching too, is they want to make sure of, like, they're trying to mitigate any downstream things that they don't want after getting a puppy. So they want the knowledge on it.
Yeah, and then it was always like, oh, well, like the Husky Corgi is like really like, so if you have like a small apartment, don't get it. So it's always like, kind of like, it's not too, I don't go too hard and be like, this is a terrible dog. It's just like, it's the wrong dog for these type of people.
Well, and because we're emotional beings, we end up getting the dog. We just need to know that we read it ourselves to say, I did my homework and I've come to terms. That's always the way that it goes. One thing to dig into is this world of, so given geography and given that there are people in all these different markets, is there a world where we can still maintain a quality lens without feeling like we're trying to use a blanket strategy to take, we'll call it like the same article and say, we'll call it metabolic health in Seattle, metabolic health in White Rock, BC, metabolic health, like we start getting into these geographic things because we're trying to rank. But if we can find a way to create meaningful content on a geographic basis, is that a play, or is the game, hey, let's stick more with food and lifestyle choices as they pertain to metabolic health and get long tail in that way? Or is it both?
It depends on the industry. I'm not convinced that consumers search that way. I don't know if they search metabolic health plus Seattle. Maybe they're looking for a doctor. Maybe you guys could do this index of all the, metabolic health clinics within a city, and that like would be interesting. But I don't think that's like I don't think every industry has a local geo play.
No, if so, scenario might be somebody lives in that market, they're searching for whatever keywords they might search on a macro level, but because of localization, they're seeing a member story about like Billy in Wichita, like they're from Wichita, and they're seeing that come up first. So it's a member story that features glucose monitoring because it's got enough keywords, but it's ranking highly because of the localization factor. Like, what are your thoughts on that as not a hack, but making sure that we're still serving up great high quality content, but spreading the message far and wide?
I mean, assuming that matches and aligns with consumer behavior, where they do search for local metabolic health information, I would think it would be in the context of looking for a specialist or some sort of clinic. I think that could potentially work. And if I were to do it, I'd probably, start with one state and I'd do like 100 cities in the state, and then I'd stop there and see what kind of outcome I get. And if it's good, I'd scale, but I wouldn't go super broad past the small pilot before I proved it out.
The advice that we often get, that the more Ben and I have these conversations and talk to smart people, we're told that I feel like a lot of the things we've heard from agencies are some of these kinds of tricks, right? It's the backlinks, it's the keyword stuffing, it's, that kind of stuff. I guess we haven't talked that much about keywords, but maybe that's a space to dive into a little bit if you have thoughts there, because this is a perennial problem for me. I'm trying to write a journalistically good article, and I'm trained as an editor to edit out repetitive phrases. And then the
Yeah.
SEO optimization comes back and it goes, no, you need to use this phrase 17 more times in the article.
I also think that's BS, but let me touch really quick on what you just said about kind of like hacking it. The framework that we've discussed today is actually really empowering because it means two things. One, it means that every factor is within your control. There is no praying to the Google gods. I really hope this works. I hope these backlinks I sprinkled on the website pays off. Like, you don't have that. It's within your control. You can control quality. You can control your website. You can control the user experience. And that's a very powerful place to approach SEO because it doesn't mean it's up to chance. You own the outcome. If you don't get the desired outcome, it's not because of some voodoo magic. It's because of you didn't do the work. The second part is that the framework that we discussed is actually amazing because it can answer almost any question that will come up throughout your SEO campaign or marketing activity. If it's relying on hacks, well, there is no framework for decision making. But if it's relying on content quality and content scale, well, that can answer almost anything. Is this a good intro? Well, does it add more value to the user than this other intro that you have? Is this internal link good? Well, should the user go down this path because you want to expand on the topic? And having a framework that allows you to answer that question or any question without having seen it before is also really, really helpful from just a sanity perspective, because you don't have to get in arguments about like, oh well, like Moz blog 2007 it says like this, but like on this other website it says this. Just what's best for the user, do that. And I think that's really helpful from an execution perspective. Going back to those 70,000 keywords, how many pages should I create? No one really knows. The SEO tools don't tell you. We create a tool called Cluster AI, and basically dump into 70,000 keywords and your job is done. It spits back every page of content you need to create and which keywords will rank with that page. And so one page might have hundreds of keywords, variations of the main keyword that can rank with that main keyword. And the way that we approach it is we tell our content writers to create the best content possible that they can possibly can. And then during the editing process, when our editors are touching it up, they go and sprinkle those keywords. So if they say, metabolic pathways 100 times, you might change, a lot of those to like metabolic, something similar to pathways, but like, you know what I'm saying? Or like, okay, a better example, if the writer uses glucose monitoring 100 times in the article, change some of those to glucose tracking. And so I think that you can focus on creating the best quality content. You can do a little bit of a little bit of SEO, and it just naturally ranks. And so when you look at our content team, our writers don't know SEO, our editors don't know SEO, and our SEO PMs were formerly editors and writers that learned SEO with us. And so a lot of the time they don't even know what they're doing. They just know Nick needs me to write the best content possible and then sprinkle little keywords in. And they don't know why they're doing it or how it works, but when they do it, it just naturally ranks. So don't focus on the keyword stuffing, focus on the quality. And then if you notice a writer's using the same keyword a million times, swap it out with a different one that's slightly similar, because one page can rank for hundreds or thousands of keywords, not just that one main keyword.
Are there other, where I was going with that's helpful in the keyword part, where I was going with like the idea of the H2 or the meta information, are there other things besides the sort of meat of the article, which is largely what we've been talking about, right? Is your article answering the user's questions and serving the user? Are there other things around that maybe don't quite fall into the fully technical voodoo SEO, but things that one should consider? How important are titles? How important is meta information?
It's important in the context of getting the click and kind of driving relevance to the term. Google, like in terms of how relevant is this page to like what they search for. They're looking at the URL, they're looking at the meta, and they're looking at the H2s within the content. So, it's important from that perspective, but I don't think you need to get super fancy. One thing that I do. So if I have a page, let's say you're on like page 2 for metabolic health, and you want it to rank on page 1, I won't build any backlinks. I'll build internal links, and I'll go back to the 400 pages on your blog, and I'll create an internal link that's relevant to that page I really, really, really want to rank for. And generally, that's enough to get the outcome that I want. If your competitors probably don't have 400 internal links to their top ranking page, so it's an easy way to beat them.
Very cool. Anything else to add before we wrap?
Yeah, we touched the surface, but I actually have a 5,000 word guide on exactly how we took Do Not Pay from 0 to 1.5 million organics a month and drove almost 100,000 paid subscribers on workello.com. I also run one of the largest content operation communities on the internet called Fat Graph Content Ops on Facebook. And then you can find me on YouTube at Content Distribution is my channel name. So Workello, Fat Graph Content Ops, contentdistribution.com.